To Mike. Hey. I think we're all a little, our brain cells are kind of gotten overloaded. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to begin with a few opening remarks, and then we'll go right into our panel. I'll do an introduction before each. We're going to ask everybody to hold questions until the end. We want to make sure we get through the panel because we've got four presentations, all of which have some pretty significant information. So again, my name is Robbie Townsend. I work as the executive director for the Kodiak Archipelago Leadership Institute, or CALI. CALI began working in 2013 with our rural community partners to determine ways to increase food security in our region. Since then, we have built out a network of 4 village farms with both soil and hydroponic production, a hydroponics farm in Kodiak, and most recently added a small level of hydroponic production. As part of this work, delivers a comprehensive soil and hydroponic training program for our beginning and more advanced farmers, and the network we have as Alluta Grown and is one of the first rural and Alaska native farming collectives. And all our farmers and speakers are up here. You can come up and visit with them afterwards. Alluta Grown soil farms were firmly established. It became clear that year-round production is required to provide continued access to fresh food in our island communities and to provide for farm sustainability. Our Alluta Grown farmers were very interested in expanding into hydroponics for year-round production. But Off-Road System Alaska faces some very specific challenges in moving to a growing heavily on reliable and inexpensive power, and in some cases, internet connectivity. Rural communities may face high utility costs, unreliable power generation, abysmal internet connectivity, and little, if no, access to qualified assistance for design, startup, and maintenance of hydroponic systems. Alluta Grown is overcoming these obstacles by working together as a region to identify opportunities, build out farming competencies, help each other with challenges, and share successes. We have 3 years of hydroponic training and equipment installation, and all 6 of the farms are now able to produce at some level year-round. And the farms continue to expand hydroponic production initiatives. The Alluta Grown experience demonstrates that with thoughtful choosing of hydroponic growing systems combined with a strong network, hydroponics is feasible for rural off-road system Alaska. This panel was inspired by a desire to share information on hydroponics, the opportunities they present to build regional year-round food production throughout our state. And the panel is going to progress from some really good baseline foundational information from Dr. Triston with the University of Arizona Controlled Environment Center to our Alluta Grown team showing what they're going to show pictures of their equipment, talk about what they're using and some of the challenges and successes they've had. Then we're going to have Seeds of Change, which is a really cool urban model of using hydroponics for food and as social change. And then we're going to end with Chantel Harrison with Indigeponics, moving to that next level of perhaps growing traditional foods hydroponically. So let's get started. And again, please hold all questions until the end of the panel. And panelists, you're going to get a 3-minute warning from either Max or I as we get close to the end, because we want to keep things moving forward. First up is Dr. Triston Hooks. He's, I think, already there on the screen. Triston joined the University of Arizona Controlled Environment Agriculture Center in 2021, assistant professor of practice systems engineering department. He graduated with a PhD in environmental sciences from New Mexico State University in 2020. Since 2019, he has worked as a research associate at Texas A&M AgriLife Research Center in Dallas, where his research focused on urban agriculture and controlled environment agriculture technology, including hydroponic systems and LED lighting. Triston began working with Alluta Grown this past year when he traveled to our farms to provide technical assistance to enhance and increase hydroponic production. So Triston had a wonderful week. He got perfect weather, so he thinks it's like that all the time. But he did get a taste of rural homesteads. He had to climb in and out of, cubs and all that kind of stuff we have to do to get out to the villages, which is fun. So Triston's presentation will cover the fundamentals of successful hydroponic leafy green and fly crop production, while also focusing towards the end on cost-effective and energy-efficient systems suitable for rural Alaska. So without further ado, Triston, you have got the floor.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robbie, for the introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I wish I could be there in person with all of you and Robbie and Max and Chantel, but I'm happy to join via Zoom. I did, as Robbie mentioned, get the amazing opportunity to go visit for the first time in Alaska this past summer, and that's my cover photo here on my presentation. So it was absolutely beautiful. I was floored. And yes, that is the picture that I have in my head of Alaska all year round now. I'm here to talk about CEA for food security. I do work for the University of Arizona Biosystems Engineering Department. They have a unique setup where they are home to the Controlled Environment Ag Center, which has over 20 plus years of experience in CEA and hydroponic production of not only leafy greens, but they've also historically focused on vine crops, which is what I teach currently and what I'm hoping to talk a little bit about in this presentation. So without further ado, I will get into my presentation. I think I have about 20 minutes, so I might go fast. How about we can go to the next slide, please. Awesome. So CEA for food security. So first, I'm going to talk briefly about food security, although I think maybe everyone is very familiar with this topic. But food security can be defined as the availability and accessibility of safe and nutritious food. And I teach this to my students, and my students are always surprised to find out that, yes, this affects us even here in the United States. And of course, even out of the mainland, I've got Alaska, of course, and even Hawaii there. It especially affects people there. But this is a global situation. So about 10% of the global population, that's over 800 million. And then even within the United States, that number is similar, about 10.2%. So over 13.5 million are affected by food security. And that's the availability and accessibility. So availability having to do with year round. Is it available? Is it there? Is it ready? Are there delays? Are the shelves full? Are they empty? And then accessibility having to do with how close is the nearest grocery store? How close is the nearest a local food production facility, agricultural facility? How far does that food have to be shipped? Are there delays? Are there weaknesses? And so a lot of factors play into here that all impact food security. And so I'll kind of lay that as the foundation for how CEA can help strengthen food security. All right, and we can keep going. Okay, so traditional agriculture, where most of our food comes from, relies on three big things, three main things. One is arable land. We need arable land, and that is a limited resource. It is not unlimited. You cannot just make it or expand on it. That is limited, and it's actually declining. So there's a USDA or actually FAO report, and I've got one of their figures up here on this slide, and they're showing arable land, cropland per capita. It's actually declining, and it's been declining. So traditional ag relies on limited arable lands. There's one component. The next one is it relies on favorable climate. Okay. And whether this is being impacted by climate change or just historically, it's in an area of unfavorable climate. This is a challenge. It's not only unpredictable, but it could be unfavorable to begin with. And then finally, after all this, traditional agriculture strongly relies on global transportation. Again, this goes back to climate and arable land. Those are fixed and unpredictable and limiting. And so a lot of times our agricultural hubs are focused around these areas, and they rely on global transportation to ship that food throughout not only our own country, but through the world. So those are some challenges for traditional agriculture. And then I'm going to build upon this and emphasize how CEA can help. And we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so CEA can strengthen food security. Everything okay with audio and everything?
Yeah. You might need to speed up a little.
Yeah, 15.
Speed up a little bit. Gotcha. All right, here we go. All right. CEA doesn't rely on these things, okay? It doesn't rely on arable land, favorable climate, or global transportation, okay? Why is that? Well, we'll talk about that next, but we're controlling the environment, whether through the facility or the systems that we're using. So we're kind of creating that ideal environment virtually anywhere we want. And then, of course, I have to mention this. The goal of CEA is to complement, not replace traditional ag, okay? We're not trying to replace traditional ag. We actually can't replace traditional ag. We need traditional ag, but CEA has the beautiful ability to complement traditional agriculture as it strengthens food security. All right, next one. So what is CEA? I've been mentioning this, maybe you know, maybe you're unfamiliar, but CEA is controlled environment agriculture. Here's a technical definition. It could be an integrated science and engineering based approach to provide specific environments for plant production, okay? So engineering based approach, controlling the environment for optimal plant production. This could be temperature, humidity, vapor pressure deficit, light, nutrients. Take all these environmental factors and tune them for optimum plant production. It can look very different. I've got 4 pictures up here on the screen. There's a high-tech, this was a lunar module that the U of A had proposed. We've got a high-tech indoor vertical farm at the top right. We've got a simple kind of high tunnel setup on the bottom left. And of course, we got a rooftop greenhouse on the bottom right. So CEA can look very different, which is the beauty of it, which is its strength and beauty, because it can be very versatile. It can be high tech and low tech. All right, next one. So at the core of CEA is hydroponics, and hydroponics can be defined as water working. I love that definition. Water is doing all the work here. You can see in this photo, the roots of these plants exposed, they're actually floating on the water. The water is growing our plants. There's a heavy reliance on the water, but it's not just water. It's a complete nutrient solution. Because we're growing apart from soil, we have to provide everything the plant needs to complete its life cycle. This is not just fertilizer. This is not just NPK. This is all the macros and micros that the plant needs to go from seed to seed, grow, bear fruit, flower, produce seed. So hydroponics is at the core of CEA. Next slide. All right, hydroponics is soilless. We still rely on a substrate. I love this picture, this cutaway showing the roots. This is for vine crop production. So vine crop relies on the slab culture. There are other ways to do it, but one of the primary methods is a slab culture, and it uses these slab substrates. And this is a picture of it right here. Beautiful cutaway showing the roots. And it's a simple drip irrigation system going into here. Actually, I shouldn't say irrigation. Technically, we call it fertigation. It's our hydroponic nutrient solution being drip irrigated to this substrate slab. And we can go to the next one, I think. Yep. Okay, so CEA benefits. So why do we go to all this work to control the environment, produce this optimum situation to grow plants? Well, we get extended or continuous growing season, consistent and uniform production, and really the one of the core reasons is greater yield compared to open field agriculture. So here is Dr. Merle Jensen. He is kind of our legendary founder of the SEAC. at the U of A, and he pioneered a lot of the vine crop production for hydroponics, which is challenging. It's a challenging group of crops to grow. And he pioneered a lot of this. And there's actually some data here, and I've kind of summarized it in those red numbers. I hope you can see them. But essentially, they're comparing hydroponic CEA to open field agriculture. That's OFA. And you sum it all up, and essentially you got about 5 to 20 times the yield, depending on the vine crop that you're growing compared to open field. So the average is about 8 times. So those are some benefits. We can go to the next slide. Other benefits include less water, fertilizer, and pesticides, okay? This is because we're optimizing that environment using precision technologies. And because we're in a controlled environment area, we can actually exclude and prevent a lot of pests and pathogens, although that can still be a challenge. Another topic, a whole nother topic is integrated pest management, but that works beautifully with CEA. CEA can also be hyper local, less transportation. You could do it hyper local, whether that's in the middle of the city or in rural areas, which we'll focus on here. And of course, you end up with enhanced food safety and, oh, there I have it. Okay, IPM, integrated pest management. Awesome. Okay, next slide. All right, well, CEA has largely focused on these big high-tech facilities. Okay, we have a handful of them across the country. There is a lot in Europe and even south of the border in Mexico. There are a lot, and actually in a lot of the Asian countries too, Japan, Taiwan, China. They have large, high-tech, advanced facilities, and that's what CEA tends to focus on. And I've got a list of examples here. So you may have heard of some of these: Aero Farms, Plenty Farms, Eden Greens, Bright Farms, Gotham Greens, big, large scale, high-tech CEA operations. But there's some challenges. And so we'll go to the next slide. Energy is one of the biggest ones, okay? So especially when you get in these high-tech, large-scale facilities, energy is a huge challenge. Labor and skilled growers is another one. Cost of technology can be limiting. And then CEA and hydroponics is relatively new. There's a lot of unknowns, and it can be intimidating. I've got a graph here that's from a paper from Barbosa. You could look that up, but they compare hydroponics to conventional, and they have an energy comparison here. And the bar doesn't look too bad, but it's slightly misleading. It's actually saying that hydroponics can use up to 100 times more energy than conventional agriculture. And that's a huge challenge. Okay, especially as Robbie had mentioned, if energy is an issue to begin with, maybe it's unreliable, intermittent, or it's costly. So how do we do CEA? The question is essentially, does it have to be high tech and high energy? And the answer is no, it doesn't have to be that way. So next slide. All right, there is a need for small scale, low tech CEA application to address food insecurity in rural communities. I've got the Aluticrone map here to kind of highlight this, which I had the honor of going to go visit and help and see, which was eye-opening to myself. And so there is a need, and there is certainly potential for CEA to answer this challenge. So next slide. All right, so what does rural CEA look like? Maybe we've seen the high-tech stuff, but how do we apply it in simple or rural or low-cost, small-scale situations? Well, it could be small greenhouses. It could be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be a massive indoor facility or even a massive hundreds of acreage greenhouse facility. It can focus on leafy greens or vine crops. So it doesn't just have to be lettuce, vine crops. And actually within vine crops, there's a huge potential for crops, including berries, strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, other vine crops, peppers, tomatoes, melons, cucurbits. And then of course, there's even room for hops or hemp or cannabis. Lots of crops that fit into this category that can be used. And of course, they can be low energy hydroponic systems. I'll talk about a few of these next. So next slide. Okay, I had to throw in my students. Okay, so this is also what it looks like, just to shout out to all the students who are kind of participate in the programs at the U of A SEAC, and they're getting the hands-on experience and knowledge and skills of actually learning a lot of these systems that even apply to these small scale, low energy CEA systems. Next slide. Okay, here's a picture of also what it can look like off-grid, solar-powered hoop houses, just plastic covered setups. And you could even use sand culture. You could work right in the ground if you want to. You could amend it. It could be with sand. And so this is a great example of just off-grid, low-cost, simple setup. Maybe it's powered with solar panels or other alternatives. But this is one example of what rural CEA can look like, or for off-grid options. And next slide. All right, I think I got a few more examples left, and then we'll end. Great, perfect. Okay, here's another example. We've got a rooftop greenhouse on the student union. The student union at the U of A campus is actually considered a food insecure location for the students. They actually are not nearby any grocery stores. And so there is a campus pantry for them. And we actually threw a rooftop greenhouse on the rooftop of the student union where we're doing CEA hydroponics, producing produce for them every single week. Okay, next one. Here's another example. Locally, I pulled, we do internships with a resort in town. They put up a tiny little greenhouse, the smallest greenhouse I've ever seen. They put in a hydroponic beto bucket system in there. So they've got about 40 tomato plants in a simple setup, and they are growing for their restaurant. So this is a great, I love this example of just a simple setup. They put this together. And they're doing hydroponic CEA tomatoes for their restaurant, and just a great example of small scale CEA. Next one, maybe this is the last one. Okay, this is my student club. They also have a small greenhouse, simple setup, but they're doing a lot of DIY systems, just throwing things together, a strawberry tower, these Kratky beto bucket systems. They're completely passive. They don't require any energy. Small scale desktop systems. So lots of potential for DIY passive systems. Next one, and maybe this is the last one. Okay, I just want to emphasize this system using these bucket systems. That's called the Kratky method. You don't need any air pumps. You don't need any water pumps. You simply put your plants in these buckets and it's all passive. You just have to manually adjust the solution level inside. And the plant roots are exposed to half solution, half air, and that's how they're oxygenated and thrive. So we've done this with several plants. It's a great way to do that, to start off with hydroponics, maybe at your home or backyard, and of course, even in a simple indoor or greenhouse setup you can do. And is that all? Maybe, okay, I think this is the last one. Okay, it can also be indoors, it could be containers, it could even be rooms, old rooms, labs, schools, whatever it is. Lots of setups can be modified to grow plants. However, if you're going indoors, you will be using lights, and lights are a major energy cost. And so you want to use them strategically. We create light maps, light plans. All these need to be integrated to be able to use that energy effectively, but not wastefully, to use the least amount as possible for these rural CEA applications. Okay, there's a lot more to get into on those topics. I think there's so much potential for CEA. You know, with my background, especially at the U of A, we focus on the, we tend to focus on the glittery and the glamorous of CEA, but it doesn't have to be big and fancy. And so I see huge potential to apply these same technologies and these same systems to smaller scale rural applications to strengthen food security in those areas. So this is the picture from my workshop last year, and some of the colleague group is there. And so I think I can end here, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Tristan, and you're gonna hang around for questions, right?
Yes, I will. I hope I ended on time and didn't go too fast, but I'll be here for questions.
Okay, hey Max, you're up next. So now we move, we want to thank Tristan for that. Oops, Mac, I'm not even reading my own rules. Okay, is this?
Yeah, that's all.
Is it? There it is. Okay. So next up is actually a lucha grown. And you're going to see some of the things that Tristan talked about out in these 5 village farms. I will just introduce them. Max Lyons at the Marlene Knoyer Gardens in Larson Bay while working on his bachelor's in environmental sciences. He joined the Collie staff full-time in 2022 and is a sustainable food systems coordinator for Collie and Alutiiq Grown. Sam Knoyer, Duke Delgado, and Jill Kewen, who are over here on the right or left, and Becky Gomez all serve as farm managers farm, a job that requires skill in soil and hydroponic growing, as well as selling and marketing. Joe began as a farm intern, and he is now overseeing a large farm expansion for the Port Lyons farm. Alutiiq Grow will provide a virtual tour of successful uses of hydroponic methods and equipment piloted over the last 3 years for growing food year-round in the Kodiak Archipelago. Max? And I'll flip a 3-minute sign at you.
Perfect.
About 15.
Introduction, I thought that was a good way to introduce hydroponics. What is hydroponics? And now see some examples of it. So this is a Joe Kuhn down in there, Port Lyons farm, tending to two of his 3 hydroponic cabinets. So quick background on Cali. We're a community-based nonprofit whose mission is to support the long-term sustainability of our region's coastal communities of Alutiiq heritage. Kodiak Archipelago Rural Regional Leadership Forum has been going on since 2005. And that is really the heart of Cali and leads to the advocacy, bringing the rural leadership, the communities to the table, bringing everybody together. And from there, Alutiiq Grown farms and soil farms and mariculture have come out of the forum as community initiatives. So Robbie already introduced the team, but Otto, Spruce Island Farms in Zincu. Sam Knoyer, Marlene's Garden, Larson Bay. Kodiak with Sycolytic Sunrise Farm in Old Harbor. Becky Gomez with Moloch. Joe Kewen with the Port Lyons Farm in Port Lyons. And then most recently, Dan McCoy, see him planting some seeds over in Akiak. And they're going to be doing their first harvest here, probably, actually. Just to give you a background on the geography. So yeah, Kodiak is in the US. And we're spread out 6 tribal and community-owned farms spread out around the region. And yeah, so each community is only accessible by air or ocean. So you can get to the town of Kodiak by Alaska Air, but then to get to any of the rural communities, it is boat or air. All right, so Tristan mentioned some of these, but why did we decide to choose hydroponics and venture into hydroponics to expand? First and foremost, it was the year-round production. So each of the farms, except for Akiak and Kodiak, have 2 hoop houses. So outdoor hoop houses. Some are in-ground gardens in there. But as you guys know, in Alaska, it's a short season. You're lucky to get your plants out in May, beginning of June, and then wrapping up, early September into September, depending on where you are. So to be able to expand year-round production was really enticing about hydroponics. On top of that, this has come up in some of the other presentations I've been in, land saving. So we can grow pretty much anywhere. We're just looking for space. This cabinet here is inside, just inside a hallway, inside one of the corporate offices buildings. Cabinet in there, it was already heated, and it's a little micro leafy greens and herbs. Down here in Kodiak, this is our containerized growing system, CGS. So that's a 40-foot shipping container unit that was put on a gravel pad and growing there year round. So as you can see, versatility in where we put the systems. Increased produce quality, big thing, because if you need to have anything on the shelves, the produce quality is pretty poor. And then by the time you even get it back to your home community, what's left, you're pulling apart. Half of the lettuce is already got to add on top of that. So increased produce quality, and then time savings and predictable harvest schedule. I often joke that Excel spreadsheets and hydroponics go really well together, because you can start to be, every 4 weeks we're going to have this much. And eventually you can get to that point, but there is a learning curve and a lot of trial and error. But it saves a lot of time, quicker yields, and a more predictable harvest. Okay, so this is a overview on our production capacity currently. So you can see the first column is the farm. We got Marlene's Garden all the way down to Kodiak at the bottom. And the second column is each community got 1 to 3 of the VHH, which is vertical harvest hydroponics, NFT cabinets. So those are the cabinets which you guys saw on the previous slide that could be placed in various locations, and they have a growing capacity of 115 plants. So the way that you structure that, you can harvest, you can harvest every other week, or harvest half of the cabinet, once a week to have consistent production. In terms of large scale NFT systems, that's where you'll see, so Port Lyons Farm is getting one of the containerized growing systems online. And those have about an 1,800 plant capacity. So we're working to do, about 450 plants a week of lettuce varieties, which Becky's been doing a great job of, and get that consistency going. And then Cyclitic Sunrise in Old Harbor is unique. They actually are doing outdoor hydroponics. So they started to build out one of their high tunnels with soil, and it takes a lot of time to build soil. So they took out the soil beds, put in a hydroponic system, and they have around 1,000 plant capacity in there, and you'll see a picture of that later. So it's great because they have free electricity. They're just using the sunshine, but it is very seasonal. They can't produce year round in the high tunnel. The bubbler buckets, which are a cracky method that Triston, or a version of the cracky method that Triston alluded to. You'll see a variety of different some for Marlene's of the buckets, because they're going to be growing vine crops inside of 2 of their containers. And then most recently, Dutch buckets. So I'll be showing you guys a picture of these, but as you start to buckets or the cracky method, it becomes more efficient to transition them into a Dutch bucket system, which has a recirculating, or just the irrigation and fertilization is more efficient, as you guys will later see. So we recently, when Triston was out in August, each of the communities, we brought out 4 bucket systems, and then recently got out another 4 bucket systems. So each of the 8 buckets, with the exception of Old Harbor, who took another one of their hoop houses and threw a bunch of Dutch buckets in there so they can grow tomatoes, strawberries, all sorts of stuff with their Dutch buckets. And then this is our household customer base on the food hub, which I'll chat about later, but that is how we're trying to build a customer base in each community and the households for the farms to produce year round. So just to do an overview of the systems that we're nutrient film technique, NFT systems, that is the type of system that has. So you can think of a rain gutter, just a trickle of water going down there. It's a close-up shot. There's some bok choy, some lettuce, basil, all interplanted in there. And that's at Marlene's Gardens. And down here in the center, these are the CGS units. So it's pretty much it's a cabinet on steroids, just a bunch of these stacked up in here that can produce an incredible yield of lettuce. So we have these pumps going consistently, just a trickle of water running. And currently, at least for the CGS, we run our lights at nighttime, so that helps offset the heating costs. At the coldest part of the day, the lights kick on and keep it pretty consistent. So here's a picture of the Old Harbor outdoor system, just to reference the different scales. So you can do large scale outdoors in height. But on the opposite end, you can do much smaller scale. So these are some tabletop systems in Marlene's garden, ordered off of Amazon, I believe, relatively cheap, put in a grow light over there. And that allows you to specialize in a crop too. Certain crops, they have different mixes of nutrients. You can blend certain leafy greens and herbs together in the same system, but something like spinach, a higher nutrient dosage, it allows you to separate it out. So, and this is a small little system in my living. You can go down to that hyper local scale and have it right there. Move it over to the bulb. So this isn't exactly the crack method that Triston alluded to. It is a 5-gallon bucket. The roots are suspended. The only difference is there is an air pump right there. So you can have the bucket fully filled with nutrient solution, and the roots don't suffocate since there's oxygen. But that's good for just experimenting with plants or for certain crops. We call Joe Cuban the watermelon king of Kodiak. He's been growing little sugar babies in his bubbler bucket system. But sure, as you can see up here, starting to experiment with jalapenos and peppers, Hungarian hot wax, bell peppers, squashes, cauliflower, so all sorts of things. So it definitely has its place and can be done on a small scale. Like, I might get some going in my living room here when I get back because it's a good system. But as I mentioned, as you start to scale up, you can imagine if you had 10, 20, 30, 40, you're changing out that nutrient solution every so often. So it becomes labor intensive to try to pick up the roots, swap out a bucket, there's a lot of moving parts. So it's definitely better on a smaller scale or for experimental purposes, I'd say. So we recently found this simple 4 buckets Dutch bucket system. And our growing media that we're using currently is perlite, or you can use like hydrogen clay pebbles. But this is our nutrient tank here, and it recirculates, dripping into the substrate and then back down. So instead of changing each bucket, worrying about the roots, you're just focused on this nutrient tank and making sure that has the appropriate ratios of nutrients and pH. This is a light rack, actually. So this one's from the ceiling, but you can actually hang the rack from it. So it's a nice self-contained unit, and also provides some structure for trellising. And then this is an outdoor picture of the Dutch buckets in Old Harbor. So I just want to touch on some of the successes and challenges we've had. With regards to the successes, as I mentioned, the location selection, the flexibility of if you find a place that has some heat, you can throw a hydroponic system in there. It's pretty adaptable, depending on the scale, of course, and how much humidity it's putting off and climate control requirements. Increased produce consistency. So getting a reliable harvest, whether it be every week, every month, or whatever your schedules lay out. But regardless of weather or as you guys, the shelves can be empty or the plane doesn't get there for a week. So just knowing that you at least have produce in your community. And then that improved produce quality. It's producing something that's delicious to eat and you don't have to peel off and throw out half of the product. So producing some incredible quality produce. In terms of the challenges, it does take a bit of technical training just to learn the basics of hydroponics and growing in water and no soil, and what the plants need to survive. But the training has been completed. It's pretty simple to maintain, and the farmers can talk about that more later. Nutrients quality as well, as we're currently using nutrient salts. Since there is no soil, there are no microorganisms. Making sure that nutrient is available for plant uptake. That's why it's binded to salts. It's an ongoing area of research, I know, to expand hydroponics, a more sustainable source of nutrient sourcing. But that also shipping out to communities and that you got to keep in mind, or if you're doing an order in bulk or partnering up with certain organizations to make it more cost. And then finally, electricity usage. This definitely depends on the community and the scale. But that is definitely an important factor. And so you'll meet the team, and we'll bring them up later for questions. But yeah, Becky, Joe, Wilfred's also here. He works. But yeah, Max Lyons, Sustainable Food Systems Coordinator, and questions later. So thank you.
Thank you. Our timers were not synchronized. So, Max. Okay, we're next up is Brett Peter. The shift lead with Seeds of Change. Out as a volunteer in the spring of 2021, he quickly climbed the ranks, skills development specialist, which recently changed. In his time in Alaska Seeds of Change, he's helped grow many in his skills. He was a quiet fellow, but over time he became a leader. He currently leads tours upwards of 30 people been doing when he was starting out. Lately, he's been doing most Seeds of Change hydroponic system, and Brett will share about the hydroponics they use to grow their food, the impacts they have on the Anchorage community. So let's welcome Brett.
Cool, thank you. She said, I am Brett. I am here with Alaska Seeds of Change, lead there, and kind of right into it. And this is kind of what we do. We support youth. Alaska Seeds of Change is a state vocational program that supports young people from ages 13 to cultivate personal resiliency and concrete job skills while learning how to grow fresh out. You can kind of see some of the produce we do grow, the group of some of the people that we have. And yeah. Transitioning age youth is kind of our top. They are, young people from ages 13 to 23, a reduction in access to services. Sometimes they're in the community. Sometimes they're told to get a job and not ill support, and they may face challenges in housing and other basic needs that make employment difficult. That's the main population that we do help. Now, we are a urban farm. We are a hydroponic farm that also grow people. Now, some do day-to-day, we have daily routines and rituals. Some routines, we do what we call ag logs every day, which is just checking on the plants, checking on the IBC, and some rituals, daily checkouts at the end of every day, the end of every work day, we kind of just check, see how we're doing and all that. With that, we also have weekly routines and weekly routines. We have, do I have to? Yeah. Use the mic. I can't just.
Yeah, the acoustics in here are terrible.
That. Weekly routines, we have team time every week. That is kind of just where we gather up and we do a fun activity or maybe do a group project. I think recently we're planting trees. We've transplanted them into bigger pots. It's a good time to interact and engage with our participants. And it's just a good time to just get to know them. Another thing we do check-ins. Check-ins will be with your supervisor and check in. Any safety concerns. It will be a good, safe place for them to just bring up anything they may have. Another thing we have on-site clinicians. Well, not right now, but we do have a peer support specialist who, and you can have some one-on-one time with the peer support. clinical therapist or clinical associate. And it's nice that they're on site, so you don't have to go across town, head across town, come back. There's some work missed. And some other thing, staff is ARC informed. Now, ARC is like where we have this little diagram here. And I see it. We got a foundation, got the first floor, second floor. I'm just going to talk about the first two in the first floor because ARC is a really big thing. And foundation, we have engagement and team time. That's a good time to just engage with our youth. So have the daily checkups I mentioned, really good. And our participants. Another thing we have, education. Now our staff being ARC informed, with the youth, understand just a lot of things. Now it's have routines and rituals, as I mentioned twice. And rituals are really good just because it can help regulate someone. Say it's something to look forward to. Like I team time most times because it's on Wednesday. It's a good indicator that you're halfway through the week. You're halfway there. And moving on to the first floor, we have caregiver affect management. So caregivers are kind of just anyone. Could be your peers, could be a parent or guardian, could be, your manager. And affect management. To be a good caregiver, you have to manage your affects. Say, if I was mad and say someone forgot to spray the table, that just sets me off. That's not going to be comfortable for anyone. And that's just because I didn't manage. If I managed it well, we've been calm, everyone's been okay, comfortable. Yeah. Moving on, we have attunement. Attunement is just kind of attuning to someone's level of energy. Say someone's just really low level energy, and I'm over here just saying, hey, how you doing today? You doing pretty good? I'm doing pretty good. And they're just like, oh, yeah, I'm doing all right. It's not going to be comfortable for them at all. So you've got to get onto their level. Just kind of match their energy. Now moving on, effective response. Now ARC is really big. I still kind of learning it. I don't really fully remember effective response. I might just move on. Moving on. This is kind of just our space, square foot greenhouse. And you can kind of see in between this picture on the right is just our rose lettuce growing very well. The picture on the left is at night. It is just an overhead house with all the lights on. It's really pretty. And yeah, that's 8,000 square foot greenhouse. On this is kind of how we help youth with skill development. In my time, I have learned to become a good problem solver. And I guess, what is a good, I guess just recently, there was a leak in our Sprout City and it was damaging lights. I was like, oh, I got to fix that. Water with electricity. So I was good at fixing that and good attention to detail. Because I didn't notice the water leaking. I saw nutrient salt buildup. I saw a trail heading toward the lights. It's like, oh, that's bad. This place helped me have good attention to detail. And it has helped. I've been taking notes every day about just things I see. I think that is just because of ag logs. When you do ag logs, you take note of the EC, the pH level, and you take any notes. If you notice any aphids, you'll take note of that. And it helps me have good record keeping. And in my time, I've also had good workplace communication. Like if I did notice aphids and I didn't know what to do, I would go ask and communicate that there's aphids and I may need help with it if it was a big outbreak. That is really nice. Now safely using it, I learned things about using equipment safely. The thing is when using any sharp, use a cut glove. And I have seen an accident, really bad accident. Someone wasn't using a cut glove. It was my brother. He almost cut his thumb off. It was wild. But yeah, we safely teach that. Because, say use this cut glove. And they have say this is a sharp, and it's not really protecting this hand. So, safely use it. Now, teamwork. So teamwork, we learn really how to work closely with people. I've trained a lot of people and I've seen people train a lot of people, and it is just really nice teamwork. Being consistent. As I mentioned earlier, we have routines and rituals that we do every day, every week, very consistently. This place is helping me really things. Just moving on. Vocational drop-in. So this is kind of how anyone can get involved. Every Thursday from 1 to 5, you could just come in, learn about us, get a tour, and learn and get help with getting involved. You can get help with becoming a volunteer, apprentice, or you can just come in and just learn about us. Yeah, on the Power Center. This is like our sister program. They are right next to us. They are a drop-in center accessible for the folk of ages 13 to 23. They have food that you can make or take. They have a laundry room with clothes you could take with you, showers, and they have just a nice place that you hang out. And participants from either program can check out either space. Say an apprentice is with us. It's something to eat. They can go to the Power Center. The Power Center also hosts a bunch of groups every week. There's like 4 different groups. My favorite is art group. It's at the Power Center. Yeah, that's kind of our sister program located next door to us.
In 3 minutes.
Now, one-stop shop. We try to be a one-stop shop. As I mentioned, we got the Power Center next door. We have our on-site clinicians. So someone can come into work, and as I mentioned earlier, we got the on-site clinicians. They won't have to go across town. They can just go up their appointment. And the Power Center being right next door. They can get any basic needs met there. Like, they got the clothing, the food. It's just really nice. It's really funny that this sign says dead end, because it's not really a dead end. It's a really beautiful start. And this bottom picture, you can see the Power Center up close, and just back there, that beautiful mural that is allows to see the change. It's a nice one-stop shop. And I guess questions will be held later. That's about it.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Brett. So hang on a little bit longer.
Okay, the mic seems to have gone down. Can you hear this? Can you all hear this? Okay. Chantel, can you get out of there?
Yes.
Okay. They got you blocked in. So, not certainly last is Chantel Harrison. Chantel is Danae and the co-founder of Indigeponics LLC, an agribusiness focused on indigenizing controlled environment agriculture to support indigenous. She recently completed her PSM in controlled environment agriculture and led the Indigeponics Indigenous Greenhouse Project at the University. Her career interests include contributing solutions to address food accessibility and sovereignty in urban and rural areas. And Chantel will share her journey with Indigeponics, indigenizing controlled environment agriculture through culture, traditions, and plant relations. And that the Indigeponics project has demonstrated how technology can be integrated with tradition of plant medicines and foods using hydroponic growing methods. Now, the floor is yours. And people really want such a
Okay, let's see, does this sound good? Okay,
Do
thank
we
you.
need it up higher?
I think it's max.
That's okay. Okay.
Okay, I'll also try to speak a little bit higher. Thank you, Robbie, for the introduction, and I want to you and Robbie Mixon and Sundance and everyone for me to be here and share more about my work in person. Very exciting opportunity for me. A little bit about myself is I grew up in a kind of small town in New Mexico. I have agriculture roots on my dad's side. We have a family farm close to the Navajo Nation border. And through those kind of experiences of being involved in terms of like harvesting and being in community, that's really shaped my career. I love food. I love like the power of food and that it can bring communities together. So for 10 years, I worked in the field of nutrition, both in urban and rural communities, and working with Indigenous and non-Indigenous well, and being able to be part of. But the solution that kind of this work was you just need to eat more, and that didn't sit well with me. I felt like it was kind of to say that when there's so many different social economic that don't fruits and veggies to make it to people's plates. So 21, I decided to make a career change into controlled environment. And Dr. Hooks is actually my primary, that's how I'm connected with Rob. The Indigeponics project started as my graduate experience. It was a requirement for me to graduate. It snowballed into 2 mini programs. This is the first program in the lower 48 where it is graduate student-led project focused on gap between controlled environment agriculture and Indigenous communities about both programs. So for the larger project, Indigenous greenhouse project, getting winded, these are the objectives that we outlined for the project were very intentional, and this included environment agriculture, creating a demonstrational garden or demonstration where students can feel welcome to learn more about at the campus if they're not specifically. And the third objective was to knowledge share inclusivity, so everyone is welcome. First objective was indigenizing controlled environment. And this is from the perspective of, Navajo. I have a colleague and who's also a co-founder. His name is, he is also Navajo. And he also grew up in kind of this community that I did. So it was great to have a partner who was able to some of these processes that we wanted to include in terms of respecting our water relatives and our plants. So for this project, it was including Indigenous cultivars that could be grown in a controlled environment greenhouse. So for this project, Native Seed Church, which is a local nonprofit based out of Tucson, 10 minutes away from our campus, and to identify, believe would be well in a greenhouse, and we wanted to find a protein source that we love leafy greens and herbs, and we can't use them all within a certain time, and we know that we need protein to balance our diets. So we agreement with them that is based on diversity and respect. Publicly share the specific varieties of those of native seed search and the community seeds came from. So for now, we'll add beans and peas. In addition to collecting or using as crops, we also wanted to include our culture. So use traditions in terms of like song that they might practice in are growing. But we also wanted to where we could feel that indigenous growers practices, but also transfer them into a greenhouse in a meaningful, appropriate for them in terms of their culture, community, language. The other part of this project was learning how we want to collect data. Not a lot of research in which we could pull information. And because this is an academic institution, the pool from usually have kind of the subsets of data that are specific, very specific. So light, temperature, humidity, and in terms of nutrient solutions, ideal pH and EC. And because we know that these plants weren't studied before, we would have to refocus on how we want to present that data, not only but also to give back to communities. So that meant having open conversations with our department and community members about how we're in terms of allowing communities to have sovereignty over that data, and also how we want to kind of bridge the gap between academia and communities. So the data I collected for my research project kind of was very basic in terms of collecting information that's typically on the left. So we collected information about germination rates, flowering of the beans and peas, which is kind of a big challenge. This is also a new idea. We let the plants decide if they were going to grow in the greenhouse. We know that we're in a greenhouse and that we actually can control everything in terms of nutrient solution, but we kind of did the bare basics and kind of let them decide if they wanted to grow. And if they did, great. If they didn't, we were going to force it and try to modify any of the other components to that. Other information that we collected was light, temperature, and sorry, that's the end of that. So the other part was acknowledging our relatives. So if you were at the keynote speaker presentation yesterday during lunch, they shared some of the same ideas and concepts of using, interacting with plants as people and having them be autonomous so that they have rights. So we took special care in how we collected the seeds, how we sowed the seeds, and specifically about how we harvested, because we wanted to do that with good intention. Because for us, intention is really important in terms of, growing food in a good way and also sharing that in a good way. So this greenhouse that was located at the controlled environment campus. This was one of their smaller greenhouses, a little over 1,100 square feet. I thought this was going to be the easiest part of the project in terms of creating a layout, but I think this is my 5th or 6th draft of that. There's a lot of things that I didn't really think Dr. Hooks reminded me. Access to power source, access to hoses, and making sure every that is complementary to the plant is placed in the correct. So we had a very short time to this project. Originally, it was supposed to be from January, but because of light challenges, we didn't start until February. And these are kind of just photos of the progression of the plants. This is done in the greenhouse and then the plants.
Yeah.
So the other component is making sure that if tribes are to use this as a framework for building their own system, that we were not using, expensive or kind of out of ordinary equipment and supplies. So we conscientious about the media sources that we were using. how much, water and electricity that we were using. These are some of our systems. We had a micro on the very left. We tried to grow some microgreens with some of the seeds from native seed search. Due to the sowing density, we didn't actually get a good product there, but we did use amaranth and I think kohlrabi is on the bottom left photo. Tried some sunflower, quite right. We also tried some pumpkin seeds, but we ended up roasted pumpkins or pepitas because they day. So yeah, there was a learning curve. And on the right, we had our 5-tray propagation system for both the indigenous and non-indigenous crops. This is kind of one of my favorite systems because it was very low maintenance. It did really well for us. So the photo in is as germinating plants, germinating lettuce species. So starting on two deep water filter systems. So we did add bubblers the water. So we grew and basil, which were strictly for donation. And our other kind of favorite was beta buckets. And then these are a little bit costly, for efficient. They didn't require a lot of maintenance and labor. Felt that they were kind of were consistently busy, like we would be with the team. That is my co-founder and colleague Seamus. I think cucumbers in one of the systems. So I think we're like the crack cube bucket fans. We used these because we had some additional that germinated, but we didn't necessarily have a home for it. Dr. Hooks also mentioned that this might be a great opportunity for Navajo farmers who are not the res and do not have access to electricity for pumps. We're able to grow beans and peas, and in this specific system, that would actually not grow in any other system. So we were able to collect some tea and distribute that. So with we were able to provide lettuce greens consistently to a couple different student organizations of Arizona. That included the Gender Resource Center, Student Association, the UA Campus, SEAC, and then if you're familiar with Native, we were also able to donate to them this summer. Other kind of mini project within Indigeponics was the resiliency project, and this was funded through the campus sustainability. So we were able to, through workshops, and this was Indigenous students, staff, and faculty. We were also able the opportunity to community interviews and the surrounding students. So with these workshops, we a shortened version of the is provided at the University. We were able to do some greenhouse tours. Teaching greenhouse, greenhouse that he showed. We had through our little greenhouse. There's also another professor who specializes in able to show them how you could use fish to. The other components to this project, resources that could be shared with Indigenous growers and provide those back to Native and making those available. Some photos of our microgreen first workshop this year. So we had we also include some food sovereignty, kind of Navajo cultural component. So we were all attendees with their own microgreen. So if you can see on the picture on the left, there's a 10 by 20 4 by 4 trays. So each attendee was able to take one of those homes, but they could also apply this knowledge at home. And they actually sowed some of our microgreens, able to harvest them a few weeks later. And those are just some photos of our groups. We were also able to provide 2 nutrient shops, one in April and one in August. In Tucson, it was getting a little warm, so we had to shorten these, and we weren't able to provide the greenhouse tours, but we were 2 different NFT systems. So this is provided, it's just a system you can get on Amazon. First system we provided was a NFT system from Robbie. So these could all be used in a apartment or a dorm room, as long as they had a light source. So Indigeponics is kind of in a transitionary phase. We were affiliated with the university, and I completed my degree in August, and now we are transitioning this into a business to continue to do these activities and services to support Indigenous communities in the Southwest. So we were recently selected as an MIT Solve Indigenous Fellows Solution. So we have some funding to continue this work, but we also know that there's challenges in being a new farm or a starting farmer, and trying to provide these resources that many communities need and want. So those are my for all of our funders while at the University of Arizona. I think that's it.
Okay, where are we at?
So it looks like we have a little under 20 minutes for questions.
Max, I think I'm gonna ask you to field the questions. I'm just gonna sit here and direct.
So we're going to ask if you have a question, if you could come up to the mic and ask, and then we can direct it to the speaker that you think would help. Do we have something in the text? Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess we can start with online. Chantel, you can answer this too. What was the media that you were using in your buckets? I saw that you had 3 media clips.
Oh, in the which
Mike, please.
For the buckets. Okay.
for the crafty buckets, we use peat moss flags to actually start those plants, but then we use the hydrogen sandy table to provide structure, because these were beans and binding beans and peas. So they needed a little bit more structural support, and then we have some strength from the rafters to support that. The beta buckets, the media for that particular system actually came with it came with perlite, so we didn't actually need to buy any additional media for that.
Any other questions?
Wow, no question. Oh,
I have
there's
a comment.
Comment?
I'm sorry, I got here a little later, but,
Mike, please.
yeah, I guess I'll come up.
Yeah, come on up. Theo, yay!
Did you guys, I know she talked about deep water culture a little bit. I don't know if any of the rest of you guys did, but I helped build a deep water culture system. And it seems like for leafy greens, that's one of the best systems because it's essentially like you have a bucket or a large tub, and then there's styrofoam floats in that tub with the plants growing. And so if there's a power outage, it doesn't drain. It's constantly filling and draining, but if the power goes out. And then the other benefit is that you can space the floats differently so that you're getting maximum photon usage. Because like you have a float for the small plants, like the 2-week-old plants, and they're packed in really tightly, and then you transplant them to another float with different spacing. And you can cram a lot more food in a small amount of space that way. And then if anybody's interested in growing hydroponically without using chemical fertilizers, there's a way to transmute food waste in 2 weeks called the bokashi method into a hydroponic solution. It's an anaerobic process, and you can take food scraps and like shove them in a bucket and get organic, locally produced hydroponic fertilizer. So bokashi, it's the bokashi method. It's actually anaerobic mixed with an aerobic compost tea can create a really awesome hydroponic solution. So just want to add that.
Tristan's nodding his head, so maybe he has any
Yeah,
comments.
Tristan, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I'm aware of compost teas and liquid organic fertilizers. They are viable, but that was the first time I heard that method, so I'm gonna look it up myself. So thank you for sharing.
There's a guy in, I think Fairbanks too, Don Carroll, Waste Me Not. He's trying to expand bokashi composting around the state, so yeah, there's some potential.
Very popular in Hawaii.
It's popular in Hawaii, Sally is saying. I'm actually trying it right now because you harvest the lactobacillus bacteria in the air, and then you can create your own bokashi brand. So, or you can buy it on Amazon and sprinkle it in. And you can compost meat, dairy, just veggies. But any other questions?
Very simple. Can you do any kind of root production with hydroponics?
Can you repeat it?
Is any root production in hydroponics?
Tristan, do you want to take that one?
Carrots and potatoes.
Such as carrots or potatoes. Tristan, are you aware of that?
Yeah, there is actually, but it's still on the kind of forefront of hydroponics at the moment. But actually, the NFT systems are used to grow a lot of root vegetables. I know radishes are common, but yeah, potatoes have also been looked at in aeroponic systems. They kind of put them in these under, this cabinets for the roots, and they're misted with solution and they can be grown. I don't know of a lot of large commercial operations doing rooting crops, but I know there's a lot of interest in it, both research and for growing purposes. So.
For two, yeah, they're doing radishes. They love radishes. It grows a nice radish in there.
Hey, this is just people that are doing it a few different ways. What do you guys like? Kind of an efficient system for usage, growing in the winter, and sir, I'm thinking of growing a lot of leafy greens. Cabinets. Get those. You built them. Design
Harvest here in Rich.
vertical harvest.
Stuff from Crop King, they make all kinds of equipment.
Okay,
Give us a call.
I will. Thank you.
It's much on light situation.
Question?
But in Alaska,
Okay, so the question is on in Alaska.
like basically like lighting, not winter time.
Okay. The indoor system, artificial lighting, like the cabinets, artificial lighting, LED lighting that goes on 12 hours a day.
So LEDs as opposed to like high pressure sodium, older type of grow equipment.
Can you repeat the question?
LEDs as opposed to high pressure sodium or other lights. Speak to maybe where those lights would come in, but yeah, we're really seeing, I think LEDs are the more efficient, yeah, and they're only getting better.
Yeah, the technology.
So the high pressure sodium lights, those put off the most light, but they also use the most amount of power. Lights is the most efficient. They still broadcast light. Maybe put in some more LED lights for high pressure sodium, you might get better output.
Two questions online too Can the nutrient necessary operations be sourced in Alaska? Yeah. Kashi option for an organic method. The fertilizers, salt productions and factories, I'm not sure if in Alaska, I doubt it. And then what contain for your greens? Tristan, I'll let one and then the farmers can.
Max, I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? I didn't hear it.
Optimal temperature for greens.
optimal temperature for leafy greens.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, they're a cool weather crop, so not as warm as I grow my tomatoes. But a standard temperature that we use is cool at nighttime, 65, and then daytime no warmer than 75. So that's a standard growing practice that we use in our greenhouses.
And Joe agrees, go ahead.
Thank you, Tristan.
Has there been any studies of the value of the plants that are harvested, hydroponics versus farming?
The question is on the nutrient value versus hydroponics versus soil farming, in any study. That's something I need to look into more personally. If anybody up here would like to comment on studies, but I'll let Tristan. So the question is nutritional content, hydroponics versus soil.
Yeah, I was involved in several studies looking at nutritional content. A lot of these have to do with pigments, like anthocyanin or carotenoids that have antioxidant properties, but they also contribute to flavor and taste. Although we didn't compare to field agriculture, we were comparing organic and traditional, or organic and conventional hydroponics. And we actually found that our organic hydroponics had increased amounts of those, we call them phytonutrients. And so essentially we concluded that those plants had higher quality. But I haven't been involved in a study comparing to field crops. In my greenhouse, we test tomatoes, we test grocery store tomatoes compared to our tomatoes. Now we just do a simple Brix test, a soluble sugar content, but our tomatoes always have higher Brix than the store-bought tomatoes. But I have not been aware of an actual study comparing field crops to hydroponic crops for nutritional content. It'd be great to look up.
Anything else?
There's one in the chat.
Larger systems like eucalyptus grown rely on grants from the community, or do the sales of the produce fully cover the upfront investment of the opportunity?
I'll answer that.
Great. For the capital and startup of the, well, our first phase was funded through a U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Native American grant, and that bought the high tunnels that trained the farm. And it was for 3 years to get the farms up and running. And then we went into the second phase with the hydroponics, which was again funded for Native Americans. They liked what we did so much with the pilot back. So yes, grant funding funded the farms. Currently, each farm is a little bit different business planning. We're currently local food purchase agreement program pays the farmers for their produce, and then we're able to disadvantaged households less and through that program, we think our farms are sustainability. You have to look carefully do this. For us, it was very much feeding our, and so the tribes and the small cities have all a community project with a lot of volunteers. The kids get in, the tribes sometimes support personnel. So for rural Alaska, community has to really look at why they want to do this and if they're willing investment to get it going. And then the first part of the project, we had some communities that never produced because it was more important for them to get it out to their communities. So I don't even know how to answer this. The bottom line is your community one and what's your so-called, not even business model, but why are you doing the farm? And so from so-called traditional agriculture and business models. Question?
Well, I love seeds of change too, because I got to.
Yeah.
I think you guys scaled back your production a little bit too, because of that. It wasn't just to produce as much, make the profit.
I add more.
Yeah, we were having a discussion yesterday, I believe it was at lunch. We had all the farmers at the table and all of the increased production that they're all working on. And when that comes online, there's a really good possibility that the farms will be sustainable because we're working on our food hub to be able to move the food into Kodiak and sell it into the city of Kodiak when the village has been fed first. Is that a fair statement, guys? Yeah, they're all nodding their heads up and down. So it's kind of it's their model and they're doing it the way they want to do it. You want to add anything, Joe? Lamb? Okay.
Yeah, our goal, first off, is to feed our community with quality nutrients, quality food. And we've succeeded in doing that. We've educated a lot of the people that probably wouldn't even touch a vegetable prior to having these farms and vegetables. Our farm is funded through DIA agriculture program, and that gives us a base. And it gives us a little extra money to operate with. So very grateful for that.
You want to pass it back to Joe? And maybe Sam's from Larson Bay, Marlene's Garden, and where are you from?
Lyons.
Okay, okay.
So we try to sell as much as we can on our farm, but we also feed in our community first, and then we can sell to Kodiak or villages. We donate all of our produce to the Senior Meals Program. If you don't know what the Senior Meals Program is, it's a Title VI program. Our seniors get fresh meals every day for free or for a small price. But we supply all their fresh beans and produce.
I just have a quick question, Erica from Ketchikan. We live in very similar situations where it's not about not having access to the food. We're looking at our Ketchikan Wellness Community. We have community gardens. Like farm able to do this at the land. We do have a. Is that something that you think that it's mostly volunteer? Also, what does that look like a farmer involved?
So at our farm, volunteers, but it's pretty much show up one day and then they don't come back. So we're also using grants for wages. I know there's grants out there for but with the continuation of expanding our farm, we are actually seeing more people saying, man, you guys could really use some help. And the volunteers, they show up and then they show back up. So increase the wages so there can be more.
I need to add to that. So I mentioned, we give a lot of our food away. Our community is based on, we have like between 30 and 40 full-time residents. It fluctuates. Those are the folks that they can just come anytime. We have eggs for them. We have any kind of produce that we have available free for them. However, summertime, our community has a cannery, a fishing fleet. We have probably 20 gillnet sites. So, and we have a half a dozen lodges. So what we do is sell our produce to the lodges. We sell them to the gill netters and through CSA boxes. And then the lodge chefs will come to the gardens themselves, and then we sell produce to the lodges through that way. So we're not totally government funded. I'd like to add that. The government just funds make sure our operation is funded and we have the capacity to move on to the next year and to take care of our local community. We don't have a senior meals program. We're just getting it up and running again.
Just one more question, just one more.
Last question in the back.
All right, so I love giving my food to I'm a farmer. I love feeding people, but I'm also concerned if we create a precedent that food is our hard workers devalues our product. Is that something you are concerned about? Like down the road, if you ever need to make it a for-profit farm, people wouldn't value your product or no?
It's a very small percentage. It goes local.
Okay.
For more growth.
Yeah.
And then the others that come in, they're transients. And the transients totally understand the way we want to support our community, because these folks they're elders. Income.
I get it.
And You know, they're noodles and out of boxes, mac and cheese, and if I can add to that some nutritional value to their diet, that's a big thing to me, very meaningful.
So, that was part of our deal too. We're trying to figure out what's like the best price for our people, and I don't think we have a problem with that. We say, oh, maybe that's a little bit expensive, and they're like, for it, so it's really not a problem for us. People love our stuff.
So I think we're out. Thanks, Joe.
So it- out of time, I think it's 12:15. I really want to thank our panel and especially Chantel, who traveled all the way from Arizona to be with us. So if we can have a round of applause for the panel. If you have any questions, we'll be around, and I guess thanks, everybody.